change the format since Senator Spector has to leave. I will go with Dr. Insel, then we will have some questions for the two of you before we bring the other people up. Now we turn to Dr. Thomas Insel, Director of the National Institute of Mental Health since September of 2002. Dr. Insel received his BA and MD degrees from Boston University. Dr. Insel, welcome back to the committee.
Well, thank you, Senator Harkin and Senator Spector. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I too would like to express my gratitude for the support that we've gotten from both of you in your leadership positions over the years. As you mentioned, the NIH budget has increased very significantly. In the case of autism, it's gone up actually almost fivefold since 1997, and that's only possible with your leadership and with your advocacy for biomedical research. I think in view of the time and the number of things that we want to cover, you already have my written testimony. I think I will make my comments rather brief. What I thought I would do is to speak to what we actually know that we're confident about at this point in time. And unfortunately, I can do that in less than 5 minutes because it's a fairly short list. And so what you have before you are what I think are the four most important points that we can use as a baseline for the knowledge base. We can talk more about some of the specifics and some of the actual research as we get further into the hearing. The first point to make, and it may seem obvious, but it's actually a fairly complicated point, is that autism is a developmental brain disorder. Yes, it involves other organs of the body, and the gut is one that has been implicated, as you mentioned, Senator Harkin, but it's important for us to focus on this as a brain disorder that evolves through development. And the reason I stress that is because when you think about developmental brain disorders, it's not simply what happened or where it happened, it's when it happened that may be really critical. So much of what we need to understand is when the train goes off the tracks in brain development to result in the kinds of deficits that Dr. Gerberding mentioned, the difficulties in social reciprocity, the difficulties in language, the abnormal behaviors that are really key to autism. It changes the way we think about this a little bit because it suggests also that there could be multiple causes, but if they occur at the same point in time, and many of us think that that point may be prenatal, it sets up a set of a trajectory that's abnormal that leads to this very, as you mentioned, devastating disorder. Point number two, you'll hear from constituents and you'll read in the press, is this really genetic? Is this really environmental? And the answer is it's both. That with this disorder, as with so many of these developmental disorders that we study now, we've in the scientific world gotten beyond the point of arguing between genes and environment. It's like the old nature-nurture debate. The debate now is about how genes and the environment interact to result in this disorder. We do know there's an important genetic component, no question about that from what we have from twin studies, but we also know that that doesn't explain the entire disorder, and it certainly wouldn't explain any potential increase in the prevalence or increase even in the incidence over the last decade. So lots of interest in what the environmental factors might be, but to understand those, we will need to drill down and get a very good understanding of who has the genetic risk to be responsive to that environmental factor. So much interest now in trying to understand the complicated interaction of those two factors. Third, this is, as Dr. Gerberding mentioned, important to have early detection, early interventions. There are treatments that work. They don't work for all children. Perhaps 25, 30% of children respond beautifully to behavioral interventions, but they respond best with early detection and early intervention, particularly before age 3. As Dr. Gerberding mentioned, many of these children aren't even diagnosed until sometime thereafter. And finally, the current science more and more is telling us that this is not one illness. This is a group of disorders. Much the way we think about hypertension, much the way we think about other classes of disorders in medicine, this is one, in the way that we perhaps once talked about mental retardation, it's likely we're going to find many, many disorders within this overall rubric. Increasingly at NIH, we talk about autisms instead of autism. And that is probably an important perspective to remember as we begin to think about causes and also about treatments. Thank you. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to the discussion as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Insel and Dr. Gerberding.